All right, this is part 2. I am Chris Gazdick, and you are Mr. Craig Graves. I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist. I do have a book available, coming out soon. Not available, but it's coming out soon. Rediscovering Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. Mr. Craig Graves, you are an unbeatable mind coach. What is that?
Mindset coach. A lot of
Okay.
things hold us back in life. It's our mind that holds us back. Can get you over those humps.
So we welcome you to Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast. See the world through the lens of a therapist and a coach. But being aware this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way, check out our website, throughatherapist'seyes.com, where you can get full show transcriptions. That's kind of a neat thing, right?
Yeah, that's coming. We've done several shows, but we haven't done them all. We got over. I think we got over 100 total out there.
Yeah, we're going to be doing them as we go now, I believe.
Yeah,
and then some of the past ones we'll be picking them back up.
Exactly.
The human emotional experience. Let's figure this thing out together. We're going to skip the fun fact. We agreed we were going to continue doing that, but we got way too much to cover here with this racism issue. It is a good topic that we have had. We just got done with part 1. We've reserved. We had to cut time up a little bit with our guest, Scotty Reid, so we can have him on part 2. We're going to start off kind of finishing out our stuff on what is the solution to racism, and he was participatory in our conversation there, and then we're going to kind of work hard to sort of sum all this stuff up. But in way of introduction, again, Mr. Scotty Reid is the founder of the nonprofit media organization Black Talk Media Project. He's the creator of the award-winning media platform Black Talk Radio Network. He's the host and producer of the BTR News podcast and was the co-producer of the award-winning New Abolitionist Radio podcast. He has been producing news talk programming since 2007 and has interviewed hundreds of guests on various topics over the years and assisted many with technology questions concerning creating podcasts and digital radio stations. So that is the introduction. And here we go with the conversations on part 2. What do we do to help solve the problem of racism? So Scotty, we've been talking here on part 2 with different things, but we wanted to have you back for the whole part 2. We're only going to do part of part 2, I guess, Craig. Is that what we're doing? Part of part 2?
Yeah, I think so.
That's what it is. So, because we didn't get to what we like to do, Craig, you're always talking about, what's the takeaways. And I wanted to make sure that we reserve time for Scotty to be able to be on the part of our discussions with all of this that have to do with the single most important question, probably, about racism. Ain't nobody ever really talked too much about, or at least talk intelligently about, importantly about. And so the question that I ask you, Scotty, that we wanted to end up on is, what is the answer here? Everyone gets so frustrated. Everyone gets so crazy. Everyone gets so emotional, right?
I got it figured out. I figured it out a long time ago, man.
All right, I want to hear that then, but I want to say before you do.
Okay.
Because it's interesting when I was doing this section. See, Scotty, sometimes when I'm preparing my show, I do it just on my clinical experience, write down, organize my thoughts and stuff. And then I'll pop a Google search or whatever, and I'll, just kind of see what maybe did I miss? What did I do? Craig, do you know I did that for this question, that I said, what's the answer to racism? I went to Google page 1, over to 2, down to 3. You know how you can click on the little circles for? I stopped at the little 5th circle on the Google sign because I did not see, and this bothered me, man. I did not see one page that was like sort of a bona fide, Well-Mind or psychology.com or, a mental health site that was talking about what is helpful and what is the answer to racism. And honestly, that bothered me, man. I was like, our psychology field talks about, just all sorts of emotional things. I told you in part 1, mental health is right in the middle of this. Right. And it bothered me that I went 5 pages deep and saw nothing from nobody on this. It was wrong. It bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
It bothered me. So, what do you say? You figured this out a long time ago. What is it?
First of all, let me just say that it's impossible to change what's in somebody's heart. Only they can change. You can give them the information. You can point them in the right direction and what have you. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's up to them. Like you said, we got racists who don't even think they're racist, just like an alcoholic don't believe that he's an alcoholic. So that part of it. But I believe nobody's born racist. I believe it's a taught behavior, whether it's the parents teaching it, whether it's their peers teaching it, whether it's society in general that's teaching it, you know. So I think, and I know a lot of people are going to probably be mad at me for saying this, but I think that teaching a child racism is a form of child abuse. And I think that if you are going to poison a child's mind like that, then I think you need parenting classes. I think you need therapy. I think that child needs therapy. But I think that child, first and foremost, needs to be protected from that environment, because that's going to cause that child a whole lot of problems coming up. You know, either they're going to hurt somebody or somebody's going to hurt them, depending upon how deep their racism is, how committed they are to practicing racism. But in terms of institutional racism, and so when we say institutional racism, we're talking about a courthouse. We're talking about a human services building. We're talking about government institutions. That's what institutional racism is. A school is an institution. And so how do we eliminate, because people call the system racist and they call it a system of white supremacy. I do not believe it's a system of white supremacy. Again, look up the definition of a system. The system that we have of government in this country is it has three branches. It has a legislative branch, a legal branch or judicial branch, and it has an executive branch. What's racist about that setup? There's nothing racist. How you get institutional racism is when racists work in the institution. So then what is then, how do we eliminate that? Then that's when you say something when you see something. Just like they say that when we fighting terrorism. Well, racism is a form of terrorism. So if you see something, then you say something. If you see something incorrect that's being done to another person, then it is on you to report whoever it is that's doing the wrong. Okay? That's how, when racists feel that their behavior that's affecting other people is no longer going to be tolerated, then they'll cease to be racist, in my opinion, or they'll just be unemployed. Their choice, you know? So does that make any sense to you guys?
It does. And one of the things, Scotty, I'm hearing you talk about that makes me, was one of our intro references to an episode. You remember when we talked about moral courage? What do you remember about that, Craig?
He's doing the right thing even when it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, speaking out,
mm-hmm.
doing the right thing.
And I remember when we were doing that show, you were kind of like, surprised a little bit, and I think understood by the end of that episode. It was very early on, Scotty, maybe episode 4 or so, because it was one of those ones that I really wanted to get a mental health topic out on. Man, you were like, if somebody said something, I would say something. Easy. Yeah. But by the end of the show, Scotty, Craig realized, you correct me if I'm wrong if you recall, you realized you really flat out might not, in fact, probably won't.
Right. Yeah.
You remember that transformation a little bit?
Yeah. I do believe it's tough, and I do believe people do the right thing. If I'm not mistaken, when George Floyd was going through that situation, people were telling that guy to get off of it, but he didn't, and I guess maybe because the other cops were there, they didn't actually physically get involved. But people
the right thing to do goes back to what I was saying earlier. See, that was institutional. Now we can say, let's just call it institutional police brutality. Let's not call it racism, because I haven't seen any evidence that cop was a racist, okay? So I don't like calling people stuff without any evidence. But he definitely was engaged in an act of police brutality. So let's call it institutional police brutality.
Well, you are a stickler for words, aren't you?
Yeah. It was on one of those officers to stop him, okay?
Yeah,
it should have been on those citizens. What if the citizens wasn't there? What if nobody was there? It was on the other officers to stop him and say, that's not correct. That's not how we were trained to do that. That's an illegal chokehold. So again, like y'all was saying, moral courage. You know, William J. Gaston, and I don't want to take it back there, but this county is named after William J. Gaston, who was appointed to the North Carolina Supreme Court, who also, you know, was at one time held political office in the U.S. government as a representative from North Carolina. And he was also a very religious man, and he was a slavery abolitionist. But I came across a speech of his where he talks about moral courage. He was talking about the politicians of his day, and he was saying that you have to have the moral courage to do what is right and I'm paraphrasing, as an official, instead of doing what's wrong that the mob is calling you to do.
Yeah, and the point I want to make to you, Scotty, and I really do want to really ask that you would listen to our episode, I think 4. Neil, will you check if that's correct? The episode we did on moral courage, because okay, Neil, will you shoot that to him? You know, I'm going to make a crazy statement right here to both of you. I'm going to admit something, right? Even in that George Floyd event, just to demonstrate this, and I mean this genuinely. I don't know if I was one of those other police officers if I'd have stopped it. And I hate saying that. I mean, to my core, I would like to think that I would have jumped on that guy, took him out. Sitting right here, that's what I would want to do, and that's what I think I would do. But when I'm thinking about the emotions of that, that's my superior officer, that's my guy, that's something that would be, wow, like, will I lose my job? I'm fearful of what the public will think of me. I don't know, Chris Gazdick, if I would have done something on that day if I was one of those 3. And I hate to be honest about that.
Well, I mean, you got to be honest with yourself.
It's scary.
I was put in that position. I lost a job because I said something, because I saw something. And so I was contacted by a female employee. I'm not going to say my former employer's name. But anyway, I was a third shift supervisor. I ran a shift for a dyeing company. So anyway, the vice president I would always see him acting inappropriately with females on the job, especially those temp workers and stuff.
Right.
And then, you know how we talk office gossip. And then I'm hearing about he's taking them out on his boat and all of that. And then I'm hearing him even saying inappropriate things to me, like I'm going to help him get some of these young girls or what have you. He said it in a vague way, but I knew what he was asking.
Yeah, you know what he's saying.
I played it off. So then I get a phone call one day from an attorney who asked me, would I give a deposition for this young woman who was the subject of his unwanted advances, would I give a deposition? Now, everybody know me on that job, know me and my mother on that job as being Christians. Not just the kind of Christians that, I just say I'm a Christian because I was raised that way, but no, we try to practice it as much as possible. How could I not get that deposition when I saw what I saw?
Right.
I had to, and I gave an honest accounting of what I saw. Now, I didn't get fired right away. Of course not. But things started to happen to make my job more difficult and what have you, and it got to a point to where I had to leave.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I too have been in, difficult situations. I had to participate in reporting someone to my state board. That's a colleague, I did not enjoy doing that. That was a hard step to make. I've had to say hard things to people, in confronting, behavior that I was concerned about. I will tell you and admit to you, as far as moral courage and even the emotional things that we talked about. Oh no, I need to cut this short. We're running up on your time, Scotty, and I'm gonna totally switch us gears because we didn't talk about some of the thoughts that I had about solutions to racism and whatnot. I want to let me see. We got
just
about
so we're clear, Scotty. Did you finish your answer on what the answer is to racism?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see something, you say something,
Gotcha.
And we had to protect these children from being brainwashed with racism.
So the last thing that I want to go to is what I think is a big factor. So I'm just going to blow through, Craig, these other ones, and we'll have them posted, audience, on our website so you can check them out and study them a little bit more. But, love, some would say. right? The golden rule. You mentioned Christianity, Scotty. I mean, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I don't think there's going to be racism if you follow that. Period.
Right.
Period. The wisdom of the serenity prayer used, extensively in the AA community. We talk about having the courage to change the things that I can, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's going to take us a long way. Assume you have and challenge internal prejudice. Listen and ask. You have to root that stuff out, because you're not going to know you even have them if you don't root that stuff out and spend internal time looking at that. Personal strength with self-view. When someone puts a prejudice that's hard to refuse, the negative belief in oneself. So if someone puts something on you, like I'm a toothless hick from West Virginia that ain't got no smarts, I need to have the personal strength to refuse to accept that. Whatever. Fifthly, how about some common sense I wrote down in my little brainstorm? Stop being mean. I mean, can it be that simple? Just stop being mean. Resolving issues of personal trauma. I probably will need to put a highlight next to that one. And humor, Craig. Laugh. It's a great healing tool. So those were some of the things that I thought through. But the biggest one that I wanted to end on, and Scotty, I'm really curious about your view on this, and we're going to wrap your time up on this one and make sure you don't have anything else you want to kind of say. But I have thought a lot about, and probably need to do a whole show on, and we will actually, something called the apology and forgiveness cycle. Now, we'll probably cover it in a marriage show in time to come. But if you think of a conflict you have between one person and the next person, there's probably culpability on both sides of the conflict. Okay? That's an assumption I have here. So that being the assumption, there needs to be the person who was the offending person apologizing, and the person that is receiving the offense a forgiveness. Now, when we have a larger scale conflict, you probably have both sides needing to exercise an apology and a forgiveness. So you have 4, keyword, independent tasks, right? So an apology just means I take responsibility for being a little bit off. My bad, it's, I take responsibility. You don't even do that for the person you've offended or whatnot. You do that to better yourself. And it might benefit the other person, but it's about you. So is a forgiveness. You do not forgive somebody for being mean to you for their benefit. You forgive to let go of anger against. That's the definition. So when there's a conflict, an apology forgiveness cycle needs to be in place where the apology has nothing to do with the forgiveness and the forgiveness has nothing to do with the apology. And I think in a large scale, I know I'm trying to condense this pretty quick, but if you think of a large scale conflict like racism can be, there is an apology and a forgiveness cycle that needs to go on all sides, probably apology, forgiveness, all 4 completely actually unrelated. Now, I know that's a lot. That's pretty deep. If you follow that, what do you take from that, sir?
Okay, let me give a quick example of something I already mentioned on the show. So I mentioned the neo-Confederates tried to get this black man to debate me, right? So I didn't say anything to the black man, but I said something to the neo-Confederates. I said, don't send your houseboy to do a man's job. You come over here and debate me. Now, I thought about that night when I went home, and I said I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have called that black man a houseboy, even though that was the most accurate term I could come up with at the time, because that's what they was, in the historical sense of slavery, that's what they were doing. Okay, instead of doing the work for themselves, they gonna send this black person to come out and debate me. So I made a Facebook post and I said that I apologize for calling him a houseboy, and if anybody knows him, to contact me, because I should not have used that reference towards him. Even though I wasn't speaking to him directly, I still was calling him a houseboy. And so turns out, my daughter knows him and all that, but he had then started trolling me on Facebook. So anyway, I told him, look, I apologize, man. I ain't mean to call you this, that, and the other. He didn't say he accepted it. He just kept trolling me on politics and on debating that Confederate history. And then he started calling me a racist who hate white people. So now he's in his prejudice, So I just said, I adhere to that. If there's no contact, there's no conflict. So I apologize to this man. He still wants conflict. I got work to do, and I don't have enough time to be given to an energy vampire. And I don't mean that as a derogatory term or another name call, but that's what trolls do. They use up your energy, getting you going back and forth with them. So I apologize to him. And it's like you said, I didn't do it for him, really. I did it for me because I knew what I did was wrong. And that's
a hugely important thing that people do not realize. We think that I'm supposed to make the other person right when we apologize, and you can't. You're apologizing to take responsibility. And the same thing goes with forgiveness. When you're really in forgiveness, you're living a peaceful heart and you're letting go of anger against. It doesn't matter if somebody takes responsibility for it or not. It's about your heart and your internal.
My ex-wife still has not taken any responsibility.
Yeah, I know, right?
Whatsoever, but I have forgiven her.
Yes, sir.
For my peace.
Right. So when we bring, as a bottom line, I want to respect your time, and we need to wrap up, and I want you to have, minute or whatever time to say whatever. If we get internal with ourselves and really get genuine and real with ourselves inside, I would maintain that we will have a whole lot less problem as a society. What is your last thoughts? And I want to respect your time.
Well, I just want to thank you all for inviting me onto your podcast and having this conversation, because we live in the same community and we ought to know each other, and I just think that what you're doing in the area of mental health is a very, very critical field, and we really need that, man. I've been seeing a lot of people in trauma out there in the streets, and so I just really appreciate the work that you're doing as a health professional, mental health professional, but also because of this piece of media, this podcast that you're doing, because I believe, like Malcolm X believed, that media is the most powerful entity on the face of the planet. It can control the minds of the masses. It can make the innocent look guilty. It can make the guilty look innocent. But he also said it can be used to teach something to people so that they can learn how to do things for themselves or recognize things in themselves. And I think that's what you're doing with this podcast. So I just want to thank you guys for inviting me once again. I'd love to come back.
Man, I'd love you to come back, Scotty. It's been a great conversation. Pleasure to meet you, man.
Pleasure to meet you too.
We will chat again, it would seem.
Okay.
All right, man. That was Mr. Scotty Reid, and I guess we're still on episode 2 here. We cut and diced and all that, man. Not used to all this splicing we're doing on this episodes. So I think we have a whole lot more to talk about, Craig, on all of the things that we just talked about this evening. Let me just maybe start. So I guess we're going to go on and sort of go through some of the things we talked about. We had a thing come up that he had to kind of bail out and get with some. I shouldn't say bail out. He had some things he had to tend to, is what I mean. And he was gracious with his time, pushed a little bit limits, and stayed with us as long as he could. So we had to kind of reverse engineer and gear ourselves in a different way. So let me just check in with you, Craig. Like, what are you thinking, man? No, you know what? Let me ask you the therapy question, right? What are you feeling when it comes to all the things we've talked about this evening? The prejudice, and he used this term neo-Nazi stuff, and
no, he used the term neo-Confederate.
Okay, yeah.
And I should ask him to elaborate on that. I don't know what that means. I think it means that he said all the Confederates were gone, so these. I guess I don't know what that term means. I guess we could look it up.
I'm actually going to look it up. Neo-Confederate.
Yeah.
But tell me what you're feeling.
I feel good about the conversation. I think it was a good conversation. I think I have a better understanding of at least some of the protests that are going on. Again, I don't want to say impressed or whatever, but it was new to me that he wanted to move it and not tear it down, which I thought was interesting. And I thought the goal of all the protests was to tear these things down completely, and so I thought that was kind of a fascinating thing.
Defund the police.
When we start talking about, I'm sure you'll get into this in a minute, but the answer to racism that he gave was very interesting to me, and it also kind of solidified some thoughts that I've had on that topic. So I feel like it was a great conversation. I'm happy to have met him on here tonight.
I don't know. I don't want to out you and suggest that you say something you said off the air. I want to respect that. But remember when you were saying how you felt before and how you feel now and whatnot? Do you recall that?
Oh, when you first came came in. Oh yeah. I think that sometimes if you say things that don't line up with some lines of thinking, you get labeled. And I know the cancel culture is big and things like that. And so, but I didn't get that. I felt comfortable talking to Scotty. I didn't feel like that was an issue. The things he said I thought were interesting. I agreed with a lot of the things that he said too. So that was refreshing, to see that he and I were on the same page. And a lot of it, man, is just talking to people and learning about their perspectives and where they stand on issues. And I think once you can do that, then you understand the person. And then when you understand the person, you begin to see beyond the color of people's skin. And that's what I believe about race.
Yeah. This is something that if we're being honest and we're talking about, it is uncomfortable to start because it's so emotional. And we can edit this out. What stuck out with me, it's not why I asked you the question how you feel, it's just to tune us into what we're talking about. But you were comforted, is what you had said to me. It was comforting and soothing, I think was your word. You said
it might have been, I don't remember.
Yeah, you said soothing, and I think that's something that is very poignant when you look at the mental health aspects of talking about something that is emotional. People don't like talking about emotion.
Yeah.
We don't like talking about difficult things. And I made the joke in the intro on part 1, I think, right? Like you said when we took a publishing break, hey, we're going to come back, we're going to talk about some easier topics, we're going to kind of take it easy and chill and all that. And I've been kind of making jokes in preparation of these episodes, with some of my clients that I talk about the shows with, and personally, family, friends. I've been making those jokes, and then I followed up by saying we're going to talk about racism.
Yeah.
Like that's prickly.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It's scary. It's emotional. It's poignant. And it's powerful. And I think when you just have the conversations and talk in a respectful tone and with kindness and compassion towards people, because we're all in this together. Isn't that the phrase?
We are. And one of the things he said that I respected really in a big way too is he said he invites people to talk to him about these stuff.
And that's why we're talking to him.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome, man. I mean, if you sit down, he said nobody's taking him up on it, and I'm kind of disappointed in that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I am.
When he talked about prejudice and racism, I know he was short on time, but I wanted to go deeper there and ask him, when does prejudice become racism? And does breaking down the prejudice ultimately break down the racism? You know what I mean?
And I think it does.
I think it does too.
It absolutely does. That's some of the points I made strong to review, which I want to say again. Listen, anyone listening to this show right here, hearing our voice, that thinks they don't have prejudice, I'm going to maintain to you that you're just flat straight wrong. We have preconceived notions about things, and when people are in operation on those preconceived notions, particularly when they don't know it, that's dangerous. And in a silly sort of way, like I said, as a West Virginian, I'm a proud West Virginian, and I like saying that because West Virginians get picked on as hillbillies and dumb, and yeah, you're joke toothless. And I like having fun with it because humor heals. But that can really be a source of hurt, deep hurt, when people intimate things about you such as you are stupid, you are inferior, you are fill in the blank.
Well, it definitely can. It definitely can. And anybody who listens to the show and hears me tell that joke, Chris is a friend of mine, and we joke, we take jabs at each other and joke around. So, I tell him that joke to kind of rib him, but I wouldn't say that to somebody I just met from West Virginia.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
And I understand.
It's a thing like that.
But we deal with that.
Yeah.
And anybody
and Chris is one of the smartest guys I know, so I mean I'm not questioning his intelligence because he's from West Virginia,
right?
At all. And I know some brilliant people from that state. So
Rocket Man, watch the movie. He was from West Virginia.
Yeah, so it's not about that at all. It's just a fun thing between he and I. But yeah, you're right. And then I kind of lost my train of thought on the prejudice, but it was interesting to hear Scotty say the people on the other side were definitely prejudiced. He suspects they could be racist, but he wasn't totally sure that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I just that was interesting too, because I think a lot of things you hear these days, that's racist. You're a racist right away. And he even made the point that he didn't know if the police officer was racist.
Yeah, he did. That surprised me.
Yeah,
I agree.
I was surprised at that too.
I agree. I was like, wow, that's pretty controlled.
Right, absolutely.
Pretty controlled. And I like that he uses words purposely, because I like words too. I guess I'm a bona fide author now, right? Like, to me, you'll notice on this show, I oftentimes go from a definition. And he was glad that I read the definition of prejudice.
Yeah.
Because people don't know what they're saying a lot of times.
Yeah.
By simple definitions. And you and I just admitted, we don't know what neo-Confederate is. I don't know right now. I'm going to read it. But when you have those things going on and you don't even realize it, that's why I'm making the point that prejudice is so dangerous, whether you're talking about prejudice against mental health, prejudice about groups of people. Craig, I think there's even some prejudice about people's political aspirations right now in this country because we're so divisive and so screwed up about it.
Yeah, yeah.
You could probably ask 10 people what a conservative means. And you're going to get a lot of answers, I bet. You can ask, what does a liberal mean? And I think you're probably going to get different answers about that. And I don't know for sure. That'd be a fun little experiment to do.
Yeah, and you might be surprised, because I think there are a lot of preconceived thoughts or notions on what being a Republican or a conservative or a Democrat or a liberal are.
Yeah,
and that might not be necessarily the truth. You know what I mean?
I couldn't tell you what a progressive Democrat necessarily means. I mean, I know what they say.
Yeah.
Give money to everybody and give free college education and socialism and whatever. I don't really know. You know what I mean? That's a new term.
Right.
That's another thing. People create terms to meet their own needs with this confirmation bias stuff.
Yeah.
That happens psychologically.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Neo-Confederate, by the way.
Well, going back to the prejudice thing, I almost think that being prejudiced, and maybe I made this point earlier in our conversation, but being prejudiced can lead you to be racist, right?
Yes, I would say.
And then as you break down the prejudice, as you learn more about the other person, more about the other race, then that racism may go away. So my lack of understanding about somebody or some race of people may make me think that I'm superior to them from a racial standpoint. But then as I learn more about them, and I learn that's not the case, then the racism would go away.
I believe that you're really onto something. I really believe you're onto something. Neo-Confederates, or Southern Nationalists, are groups and individuals who portray the Confederate States of America and its actions during the American Civil War in a positive light. That's what a Neo-Confederate is.
Just read it one more time.
Okay. Or Southern Nationalists. So those are analogous. Neo-Confederates or Southern Nationalists are groups of individuals who portray the Confederate States of America and its actions during the American Civil War in a positive light. Some neo-Confederate organizations, such as the League of the South, continue to advocate for the secession of the former Confederate states.
Yeah.
So it's basically talking positively about the Confederates,
Got
I
it.
guess, right? Racism, by the way, if you look at that, Google tells us a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races. or who believes that a particular race is superior to another.
Yeah.
So there's an and or there. You're superior and you believe that in some way. That's definitely racist. A person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races. Now, that's dangerous if you think about it, what I just said about prejudice.
Yeah.
You could be racist and not know it because you have prejudice and you don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I mean, those are real things if we're looking at it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
A person who shows or feels discrimination. You might not realize it. I mean, that's what makes this stuff so emotionally tricky and charged, because you can begin to diminish the sanctity of an individual without realizing it.
Yeah. Right.
You know, in close, intimate relationships with the abandonment and engulfment cycles, you know, we really can appear controlling from the abandonment side of things and not want to be controlling. We're just wanting to be intimate and close. And so to be close, abandonment people oftentimes will squeeze their partner and in very destructive ways and not know it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'm not sure how you're tying it back into racism.
Because if I'm feeling or showing discrimination or prejudice against people, that's presumed to be, by definition, racist. But you can do that and not know it, is my point.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm not going to hire a black coach because white people are better coaches. Right? That's just, isn't that true? No, it's not. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is you can believe that and operate on that and just want to have a good football team.
Yeah, but that would be the definition of racism.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
That's a racist statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to spend a little bit of time. I was way too quick on it. And Craig, if you can help me remember what he said. When we talked about, you know, kind of solutions there and how we go about things, I really believe it's very important, this apology and forgiveness cycle. You remember what I said about that?
You did talk about that, and I have questions that I didn't bring up during the conversation because I knew that Scotty was short on time. But you know, if I think that's a good point, that apologies are. But are you looking at it as part of a solution?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's a big part of the solution. And let me go into it a little bit and get your thoughts about it, because I think this is really
I want you
important.
to dig a little deeper because I'm not sure I'm following it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people weren't. I think Scotty did, and he kind of appreciated it.
He did. He definitely did.
And he was agreement with the idea that he apologized when he called that dude a boy. What was it, a homeboy or stable boy or whatever. And so look, just in a simple term. If you and I have a conflict, you can make an assumption that we're in conflict, and probably, more than likely, both of us have culpability in that conflict. And all that means is I get hot, I get irritated, and I have to take responsibility for that. So generally, when you're in a conflict, you owe an apology. Unless you're really self-actualized and holding yourself completely together and being more than appropriate, which is impossible to do when you're all worked up. Right? So when you're in conflict, there's probably an apology on both sides, and there's probably also forgiveness that you have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me.
But, okay.
I got choked up with water.
I'm not going to interrupt you.
And so forgiveness is just letting go of anger against. If we're in conflict, we probably both have anger and irritability, and we need to forgive that by just simply defined by letting go of anger against. So we make the mistake of thinking, well, I've been wronged and I can't forgive unless that person apologizes to me. I'm waiting. And you don't have to wait. You feel like, I got to do the right thing, and I'm not going to apologize because they need to apologize to me first. No, listen. If you and I are in conflict, and this is a simple in and out of this, nobody has to wait for anything. Any one of those actions can happen first. I can forgive you first. I'm not going to be angry about our conflict. Or I can apologize first. I can just take responsibility in this conversation for the conflict that we have. Or you can forgive me first. First action, and then there's 3 other actions. The first action is possibly you can forgive me, let go of your anger against me, or you can apologize to me first and take responsibility for your part in our conflict. Any one of those 4 are going to be followed by any one of the 3 others, and when you do any of those actions, you're really benefiting the person who's taking the action. You benefit when you apologize. You're taking responsibility, and you benefit when you forgive.
True.
Right?
Yeah, I got that.
It's kind of complicated.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I'm all about apologies, man. I think that, if you have wronged somebody, you should apologize. I mean, I think that's the foundation of the Christian faith is forgiveness. There has to be forgiveness.
Even when it's a small part of a conflict, it's still a small part of the process to heal.
Yeah, but how does it work? Let's just say I'm not so sure that apology is a component of getting over being racist one way or the other. And what I mean by that is, let's just say I grew up like, and I didn't, but let's just say for the example that I grew up like Scotty said. I grew up in a home where I was taught racism, all this other stuff. Well, I grew up and I become a man, and I have a moment of clarity or a revelation or whatever it is, and I say, wow, I don't want to be this person anymore.
You get well.
I'm going to get well. I'm going to go out and make some friends of different races, and I'm going to be a good human being. I mean, do I go out and apologize to the first person that I meet of color? I mean, or do I just go out and be that person's friend and try to get to know that person and develop a relationship?
Okay, we just got a little bit more complicated. And the reason why we got a little bit more complicated is because my example of an apology forgiveness cycle is on an individualized conflict.
Right.
Okay. Now, let's complicate it by saying we have a cultural level conflict. Many people on one side, many people on the other side.
Okay.
Now you have many people taking responsibility for their actions and owning their own prejudice. Many people forgiving and letting go of anger against the other group of people. Many people on the other side taking responsibility for their part in the conflict. And many people on the other side forgiving insofar as letting go of their anger against. So if you're a part of the family that you grow up in, hypothetically, and you need to take responsibility, all that means is you're owning the fact that you have had prejudice. You're owning and understanding, I don't want to live that way anymore.
Right.
Right? You don't have to necessarily go and, I'm sorry, kneel down in front of somebody randomly. And I'm saying that because I saw a picture of something that just turned me over. It was like weird in some of the where white woman was, apologizing for her white privilege and all of this. It was like scary weird.
Yeah.
It was scary weird.
Yeah.
No, apologizing is just sort of owning. Hey, you know what? Like kind of I said to Scotty, I've never been a part of discrimination. It's not happened to me in the intense way that other people have experienced it. Other than my simple West Virginia example and ageism. I mean, I've experienced things like that, where people look down on me for various reasons, but on a bigger scale, you're just taking responsibility for, what? I don't understand Asian people. I'd like to know more. That's kind of apologizing. I'm taking responsibility for my ignorance. I don't know.
So you're not outwardly expressing apologizing to an Asian person. You're just
right. You're taking responsibility.
Okay,
for
then yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think I'm all about personal responsibility. So yeah,
yeah. But people don't look at it that way in this big thing. People don't look at it that way. Again, remember now we're on a complicated cultural. Many people on one side, many people on another side. Apology, forgiveness cycle. If I'm a part of a people that have been oppressed. Let's just say I'm in one of the original forms of slavery. I'm an Israelite, and I'm coming out of Egypt. I could be pissed with those Egyptians for all of eternity, and I could be in the promised land, and I can be in freedom, and I can be in having my sheep and farmland and all the stuff God gave me in the Israelites' promised land, and I can remain unforgiven heart, pissed off with those Egyptians for having enslaved me and my generations of family before me and never let go of that. I'm going to submit to you that that's a serious mental health problem.
Well, how would you diagnose that? I mean, what would that be called?
I don't even know how to respond to that. I don't know that that's a diagnosis. I think that that's a part of the human condition. I think that's a part of a hardened heart. I think that's a part of having unforgiveness and maintaining anger. That's the salty people that just can't be free from their own selves.
Anger? I mean, just anger in general.
Anger.
Just
It's
anger
hurt.
and hate.
It's hate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you offend me, Craig, and I just keep on to this and I ruin our friendship and I say, to hell with this guy, I ain't talking to him no more.
Mm-hmm.
I have unforgiveness, and that hurts me. Because we got a great friendship, you and I.
Yeah.
And we can get through tough times, but not if I'm not taking responsibility for my part. Not if I'm not forgiving you and letting go of my anger.
Yeah.
And we don't look at things that way.
Right, right. You know, you brought up a good point there, and that might lead us into the topic of the solution. But the thing that bothers me and kind of scares me, if you will, about racism, man, is, you know, I'd like to see this world that some of these guys like Martin Luther King talked about, you know, and there's a quote by Bob Marley.
Yeah.
You know, he says, I just have one ambition. I want to see everybody live together, black, white, Chinese, you know, everybody together. But, man, racism goes back to the beginning of recorded history. You just brought up the Israelites and the Egyptians. I mean,
slavery was a regular part of life.
Yeah, the Jews and the Samaritans. That's why in the Bible, when Jesus was talking to the woman at the well, it was a big deal. Because, first of all, she was a woman in that society, but she was also a Samaritan. And Jews and Samaritans, it was racism.
They are not, I was going to say superior. They're not worthy of us.
Right. Yeah, so Jesus talking to her was a big deal on many accounts, you know, but he was Jesus and he loved everybody. So, but the Germans and the Jews, you know, and now race relations in our country are so the fact that it's been with us for so many years, I don't think there's really an easy solution, if you will, to the problem.
Because it's a part of group dynamics and human behavior, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's why I say
tribalism or whatever.
Yes, you know? Yes. That's why you say it, and I laughed. I didn't know how to respond. What would you diagnose? I mean, it's a part of the human condition. It's insecurities and hurts and hang-ups and feelings and emotions. That's why I say mental health is directly in the center of this topic. You know, and it comes in many, many forms. Not on our show, but on the show that Scotty and I did together with Gaston Community Talks. I encourage you to check his stuff out because I think he does a good job.
I'm definitely going to.
You know, and that one's only on Facebook, and I think there was a problem on that recording. Hopefully he fixed. But one of the things I talked about on that show is the fact of the matter is, and Craig, we did a show on it. Remember when Tom was on our show? The present day example that happens all around us of slavery, it's not similar, it's right exactly what it is human sex trafficking.
Yeah, I think that's a whole lot bigger than we think it is.
It is.
I mean, even when we talk about it on our show, I think it's
so bad.
Yeah, there's some rumblings you hear on the internet about how bad it might be. And
listen, a human being is taken into custody and farmed out for sex with people they don't know over and over and over again. They are owned.
Yeah, this Maxwell thing could if she lives long enough.
I don't know who that is.
That's Epstein's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that could blow the lid off of a lot of stuff.
Man.
But
that's slavery right now. And, you know, Scotty makes the point of saying, you know, prison is modern day slavery. I've heard him talk about it. And, you know, your rights are taken. Maybe you did something. Maybe you unfairly got crimed. You know? I don't know. Those are arguments that people make. But it's a big, and boy, I tell you, when you have something going on like that in your generational family, we didn't get to talk about that a lot either. Intergenerational realities. I mean, when your grandma's sitting there talking about so-and-so cousin Bob was lynched from a tree in 1859, and she remembers it like this, man, visceral, and she's relaying that experience. I mean, this is my great cousin's cousin, man. That's my blood. And holy cow, like you feel that. That's a part of your experience. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine what that might be like. Mm. And I don't want to imagine that horror. Mm-mm. It's pain.
That's a good point. You know?
It's trauma. And you're hearing that on Christmas meals. Mm-hmm. Hanging out with a whiskey on the porch, talking to your uncles. Mm-hmm. You feel that. That's a part of what people's experience is. Mm-hmm. to the point, I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Can't even imagine. I know what some of the traumas I've been through in my family with addiction and whatnot. That's bad enough.
Mm-hmm.
Stories people tell, things they went through. Those need to be talked about, and those need to be healed. Forgiveness. How do you do that? How do you let go of your anger against that?
That's tough. That's
hey,
tough.
I'm going to be pissed.
That's very tough.
For a little while.
It's tough. I do get that.
So some of the other things we talked about and we didn't give a chance, I think now's a good time to jump in. You know, Craig, if you heard my list a little bit. Well, did we get a good job with the apology forgiveness? Because I think that's huge.
I think we did good there.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on to the next.
I really feel like that's a big deal. The golden rule. You know, love conquers all. Can we apply love to racism?
Not to racism itself, but I think that's how you get out of it.
Yeah.
You know, honestly do.
It's just loving people, caring, and being compassionate and kind. I think that goes a long way, you know.
I think it does too. And I think getting to know people, man, the success stories I hear and are when people sit down and talk to each other about whatever. Just get to know each other. And then they realize they're both just human beings. There's a guy named Daryl Davis. You know who Daryl Davis is?
I do now, yeah.
Yeah, Daryl Davis has an awesome story. So Daryl Davis is an African-American musician. And I think his first experience with racism when he was like 10. And he was in a Boy Scout parade. And some people were throwing rocks at the Boy Scouts. And he realized that they were only throwing them at him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know this story then. I thought you were talking about something else.
Well, they got home and his parents explained to him what was going on. You know, the Scoutmasters got him out of there real quick. And he couldn't believe that somebody would hate him just because of the color of his skin. So he's playing music in a bar one night. And he goes up to the bar after in between sets or whatever, starts talking to this guy. And the guy's like, you know, man, you're the first black man I've ever had a beer with. And he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It turns out the guy was in the Klan. But he continued to have a drink with Daryl. And
it's a true story you're telling?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He's got a TED Talk, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and there's some other YouTube videos. Anyway, man, he ended up setting up a meeting to interview this grand wizard or whatever it was in the Klan. And the guy came in and met with him. And he actually sat down and talked to him. He had his guard there with him, you know. And after that initial meeting, they kept getting back together for coffee or whatever. And you know, they kept doing these meetings, and pretty soon the guy quit bringing the guard, you know, so it was just he and Daryl. And he would come and watch Daryl play music. You know, Daryl would go to the Klan meetings with him.
He would go?
Yeah, 60 Minutes did a segment, and there's Daryl at the Klan meeting.
Oh, my gosh.
And eventually the guy came out of the Klan. He gave Daryl his robe. And to this day, Daryl Davis has taken like 60 people I think he said between 60 and 80 directly from white supremacy, neo-Nazism, whatever. And indirectly, he thinks he's got about 200. But the way he did that, Chris, is just befriending these guys after they got to know him and realized he was a man just like them. Then they came out of that life.
What time frame are you talking about?
This is fairly. He was on Joe Rogan about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago.
Wow.
Great story, yeah.
That is really cool. I mean,
but I think that's how we get over this thing. We just have to get to know each other. Like we talked to Scotty tonight, you know. It was interesting to hear his perspective and what he wants. And I think if more people sat down with each other, then things might be different.
I really think you're onto something, and I appreciate you spending a little bit of time telling us about that, because I think that has a lot of positive mental health aspects to it, you know. You de-escalate yourself so that you can really have conversations. And whenever you're talking to a family member or a friend and you feel that elevated state, Craig, you can feel it. You know it's there. Stop and tend to that inside you so that you can continue trying to connect with the person, because people don't do that well.
Yeah, and Scotty brought up another point too. I think, and he can, Scotty, if you're out there listening and I get this wrong, and please call me and correct me. But I believe he said that the the people inside of the institutions made the institutions racist.
Glad we went back here because I know your eyes popped on that.
Yeah,
one.
and I definitely I believe that. And what I'm saying about getting to know each other and tearing down those barriers, I think if you tear down those barriers in people's hearts, then it'll solve the institutional problems. At least that's my opinion.
I think that has some merit, I really do, because you're right. Interestingly enough, and Scotty, off the air, when you said that, I knew your eyes popped, Craig, on that one, because we had a conversation like that a few weeks ago, where you were kind of frustrated. I think is a good, if that's a good word, with the claims that our Constitution this and our institutions that and whatnot, and you were like, look, man, this is set up in a good way. But as with most things, religion's set up in a good way. People screw it up.
Yeah, unfortunately true.
We misinterpret. We have confirmation bias. We have insecurities. We have fear. We have shame-based feelings. We have guilt. We have unforgiveness hearts. We have an unrelenting willingness to take responsibility for our part in this. Mm-hmm. And it goes on, man. Mm-hmm. Again, that's why I say I think mental health is right square in the middle of this racism issue. Race relations and racism is equivalent to poor mental health. I mean, how's that for a statement?
I agree. Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Personal strength is something that we didn't get a lot to. When somebody puts a prejudice on you, it's hard to refuse the negative belief in oneself, We didn't get to talk a lot about that as part of the solution. That's where I added our show on Unbeatable Mind, You have to have a strong sense of self. You have to have a belief, a comfort with yourself. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm comfortable with myself. I know myself. I know myself well. I'm a 67-year-old man, and I've been living my life, and I'm good with what I do. I have no problems with myself. Come on. Well, I'm pretty sure you have insecurities when you're 77 just as much as when you're 7. That's just human emotion.
Yeah, self mastery is a never ending process.
What do they say? It's the journey is the
journey. Yeah, it's not the destination.
Yeah,
there is no destination.
And so if we look at that, when somebody puts some prejudice on us, part of getting well and part of healing is I know I'm not a dumb West Virginian. You just called me dumb. But the dangerous reality of it is if you call me dumb, somebody else calls me dumb, somebody else calls me dumb, fourth person, fifth person, 10th person, 25th person calls me and says, I'm a dumb West Virginian. You know what? I might
start believing
that.
You start believing it, yeah.
It's very powerful.
It is.
And that's why media is dangerous. Because when that gets taken over with somebody with an agenda, which we have a lot of nowadays.
They all have.
That people start believing it.
That's right.
All liberals are socialists and they're evil for our country.
Yeah.
All conservatives just want to be power hungry and all about money.
Yeah.
You believe it when you hear it. And so it takes a lot of personal strength to say, wait a minute, I am not a bad person. I am not subservient to you just because I'm a Native American. Mm-hmm. That doesn't fit my knowledge, my clear understanding of myself. See, a lot of this issue with racism in your mental health is internal. You do an internal job here. You don't do necessarily an external job. I think Scotty made that point too, didn't he? He's like, you can't change, what's in somebody else's heart. You're disempowered there. Insert another one of my solutions, the serenity prayer. Understand what you cannot control. Mm-hmm. You cannot control somebody who's going to be mean to you. You can try, you can be pissed off, you can force them to say something nice. How's that going to work?
Yeah. Not too good.
But have courage to do the things that you can control. The wisdom of the serenity prayer is understanding and knowing the difference between the two.
That's right.
Another thing, honestly, was moral courage. I think that people misunderstand how difficult that really is to speak up. I think I made that point a little bit during part 1. Resolving personal trauma, I think, is an absolute must. As a family, when you have been a victim of these types of things, you have an unfortunate task to forgive, to heal, to get through that trauma. You have to de-escalate your emotions when you think about something, when you go through remembrances of that. I mean, you remember trauma, stuff triggers it.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you've been traumatized and you're in a grocery store and someone says something mean that makes you remember that stuff?
Comes back.
Hard.
Yep.
Fast. It ain't pretty. Because my cousin shouldn't have been treated that way, and you're treating me that way, and blammo, it's on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're carrying an unforgiveness. And if you haven't taken responsibility for anything, you're just going to perpetrate it over and over and over and over again and never even know it. What else did I get that I wanted to kind of get into? How about humor? You know? One of the things that helps us heal with all this stuff is comedians, Mr. Graves. And they do it. You ever been to comedy shows much?
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is just so awesome.
Yeah.
You know, in tense situations, I'm known in therapy office to crack jokes.
Yeah, laughter's good for the heart. It is.
That's like a serious statement.
Yeah, I'm not joking. It really is.
You know, and I laugh in therapy. I try to have fun with people. I mean, I try to do it appropriately. I try to be careful about what I'm doing when I do that. But I'm not perfect with it. As a matter of fact, I did see a review one time of me. Oh, man, I felt horrible. I felt absolutely horrible. And anybody's ever listened to this and you're the person that was in therapy that gave that feedback, I apologize. It made me feel horrible. But you know what they said is like, the session went on and he was easy to talk to. It was a really good session. We started out really well. And then he laughed at me. Oh, Craig. I mean, the audience can't see my face, but I mean, can you see my face? I was like, man, that is not what I ever would want to have somebody think. And so I'm even more careful. I read that probably 3 years ago or something, you know? So I didn't catch that. What? Go ahead. You're giving me a cue on something? Okay. So humor. We need to laugh. We need to have fun. We need to get to comedy shows and make jokes and goof off, and it's cathartic. It's fun, and we can just not take things so
we'll tell some
daggum
West
seriously.
Virginia jokes, right?
Well, get a different one. How about we get a different one? You know, that'd be good. So let's sum us up here a little bit, man. How do we? Do you think we did a good job in managing the mental health factors of racism? Such a difficult topic.
It's a difficult topic. I think we did a good job. I hope so. I guess our audience can tell us.
And please do. You know, this is one that I think is going to be one of our more listened to shows over the months to come. And we want your feedback. Let's get dialogue about it. That's part of the premise of what we're talking about that leads to being well.
Yeah, it would be good. Scotty said he'd come back. So having some audience feedback, maybe some questions we could go over when he does come back would be awesome.
I think so. You know, maybe we'll think of a topic, you know, after we get through, because times are going to be better, guys. Listen, we are all stressed out with the pandemic. We're all frustrated and quarantining, sort of quarantining or not quarantining. I mean, wearing masks, not wearing masks, and trying to figure out what social distancing means, and loneliness and, you know, fear for our elderly family members, and, you know, race relations, and getting pissed off at people rioting and acting out of anger. And you know, just world seems like a tough place right now, but it's going to get better. We are going to get through this. I have no doubt about that. And when you hurt the most, you grow the most, Craig. You've heard me say that before. I think in a lot of ways our country's hurting right now. We're bleeding, really, in a lot of ways, economically and spiritually and emotionally, for sure, you know. And maybe we have Scotty back after a lot of this stuff blows down, you know, and kind of see where are we at now.
Hope so, yeah.
You know, and let's have that conversation continue, because as much as we're going to be better off for the things that we're going through now, and I do believe that. That's not just blowing smoke at you. I believe that. We continue to improve as a people. We can take an inventory and continue to grow several months from now with this stuff after it's kind of calmed down. You know, people have a tendency to forget. People don't really remember history very well. We'll deal with this issue some more. So I have no idea where we're going next, so don't ask me. I got a lot of really good guests coming up.
You can give us some previews of that book, man.
I know, right? Yeah. I planned on doing some of that when it's a little bit more available. We're finishing up production and doing all that.
Do some solo casts and just give us some wisdom from that book or something.
You know, I also am excited. I'm not ready to announce guests and whatever, but I feel very confident just to give you an idea of some of the cool guests we got coming up. We're going to be able to talk about ketamine treatment. I've been wanting to do that for a long time.
That's the psychedelics?
Yeah,
that's going to be a fun one. Yeah.
We're going to have that.
I'm hearing more and more about that, and I think it's very interesting.
I'm going to tell you I'm a skeptic.
Well, I've heard a lot of stuff about it. Johns Hopkins, man, I think that's the real deal. They've got the largest psychedelic research center in the world.
Are there any smart people from West Virginia there?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are, man.
Take us out of here, sir.
ThruItTherapistEyes.com. We've kind of done some stuff. We got a new logo. We're trying to categorize the show so you can find certain topics easier. Chris is going to be doing some Facebook Live videos.
Mondays.
Some stuff like that. So we got a lot of good stuff going on. ThruItTherapistEyes.com. Links to the Facebook, the Instagram, the LinkedIn. We got a LinkedIn page now. YouTube. We're going to be looking at videos soon. We got Neil helping us out with stuff like that. So lots of good stuff going on. Make sure you get plugged in. Anything else, dude?
I think that's a wrap.
We're out.